Good morning, Hypatia, and I hope everything is perfect in your universe. It's pretty good here, actually. A couple of rough days, but today is looking very, very good. I have been up all night again, but not in sheer pleasure, really. And your reading for today, and it's not an imposition. I love doing it. Unfortunately, we've got 3 books on the go at the moment, I know, and they are all in the spare bedroom. Unfortunately, my mum is also in the spare bedroom because Dad was being a bit difficult last night, so I don't really want to go and disturb her by grabbing them. So I've grabbed the nearest thing that is relevant, I hope. It's called Byzantium and Venice, a study in diplomatic and cultural relations, and the author is Donald M. Nicoll, Nicol. And I remember he writes pretty much the standard books on that area after the Fourth Crusade, which was the capture of Constantinople by the West in 1204, 1206. I can't remember, one of the two. So that obviously led to a lot of interaction between the powerful Western maritime republics like Venice and the centre of the Byzantine Empire. So it's time to have a look at this. I don't know what to read. Again, thorough preparation as usual. Just have a chat to somebody outside or something. We'll start with the Fourth Crusade, why not? Because it's fairly central to it all. Right. This is chapter 8, entitled The Fourth Crusade. And let's go for it. The chrysobull that Alexios III issued to Venice in November 1198 was the last of its kind. In January of the same year, Pope Innocent III had been elected. High on his list of priorities was mounting a new crusade to achieve what Frederick Barbarossa had not lived to achieve: the liberation of Jerusalem. The Venetians had never been enthusiastic crusaders. The Holy War was bad for business. In the first months of his pontificate, i.e. the time that he was pontificate, the new pope had to remind the Doge and the people of Venice that those who supplied the Saracens with arms, iron, and timber for their ships were in danger of being excommunicated. That means to be kicked out of the church. The Byzantine emperors had protested about this treacherous traffic by Venice as long ago as the 10th century. The Venetian excuse was that, since they were not a race of farmers, they must make a living by sea, and that the trade had to go by the sea too. It was a strong argument against making war on their best customers. Pope Innocent III had reservations about involving the Venetians in his new venture, the Fourth Crusade. The modern literature on the subject of the Fourth Crusade is more abundant than the original sources. Yet many problems remain unsolved, for the very reason that the sources are reticent where they might have been more explicit, or lacking where they are most needed. There is, in particular, no contemporary Venetian account of the enterprise which Doge Enrico Dandolo played a leading part. Posterity has therefore been left to infer or to guess at what his motives might have been. The Venetian chronicler nearest to the event is Martin da Canal. Martin da Canal sounds like a Catalan name. Writing in the year 1275. He indulged in a blatant rewriting of history to prove the points that the participation of Venice in the Crusade was blameless, had the blessing of the Pope, and had brought nothing but glory to the most Christian Republic of Venice. This version of events was adopted as their own by later Venetian chroniclers. The main eyewitness accounts are those of Geoffrey of Villehardouin, Robert of Clary, and Nicatis Choniatis. Villehardouin was one of the leaders of the Crusade, and his history of the conquest of Constantinople is a literary and historical monument of the first rank. Robert of Clary, a simple knight from Picardy, tells the story from a lowlier, though sometimes a livelier, standpoint. Nicetas Choniatis was a sophisticated elder statesman of the Byzantine court, who was at the receiving end of the Crusade, and as a result had to escape from Constantinople as a refugee. All three writers are biased in their accounts. It could hardly be otherwise. Robert of Clary was a naive, N-A-I-V-E, was a naive reporter of facts as he saw them. Nicetas had no intimate knowledge of the way in which the Crusade was planned and directed. Villehardouin was the only one who could have known all the facts, and yet there are crucial points in his narrative where he seems reluctant to tell all that he knows. Finally, there are the letters and acts of Pope Innocent III, whose crusade it was. Innocent tried hard to keep control of the holy war that he had set in motion, and he was a most prolific correspondent. But it is evident that he was often poorly informed about the decisions taken by its leaders, and some of his letters to them were oddly mistimed or even misdirected. In assessing what went wrong and why the Crusade went to Constantinople and not to its proper destination, the modern historian has to work with sources that are full in detail but deficient in analysis of how the details came together. He may therefore be driven to conclude that the events of 1204 came about simply by a concatenation of circumstances. Concatenation means sort of a random coming together, I think. Concatenation. A series of mishaps and human errors whose predestined conclusion neither the Pope nor any other power could prevent. Such is the manner in which Villehardouin presents the tale, a tale in which ulterior motives of greed or gain are discounted. Alternatively, the historian, eager to apportion blame for one of the greatest crimes in the annals of human affairs, bad, it wasn't that bad, may try to read between the bland lines of Villehardouin's text the simple narrative of Robert of Clary, the tragic and bitter account of Nicetas, and the public pronouncements of the Pope to find a culprit. One retains, however, the uneasy suspicion that the blame for the affair falls mainly on those who covered their tracks by committing nothing to paper at the time. Niketas Choniatis had no doubt who was the villain of the piece. That villain was the Doge of Venice, Enrico Dandolo. When the Crusade was first preached, the response was disappointing. The King of Hungary was the only one of the crowned heads of Western Europe who answered. Philip Augustus of France and Richard I of England had done their crusading. They were now committed to fighting nearer home. And in early 1199, Richard I died. The successors of the late Henry VI of Germany, Philip of Swabia and Otto of Brunswick, were also engaged in their own domestic squabble. The leaders of the Crusade had therefore to be sought elsewhere. Most of them came from northern France, from Normandy, Flanders, and Champagne. They were inspired by an itinerant preacher, Fulk of Neuilly, and by the Pope's legate, or ambassador really, Peter Capuano. The first to take the cross were Thibaut, Count of Champagne, and Louis, Count of Blois, both nephews of Richard of England. Prominent among the many who followed their lead were Geoffrey of Villehardouin, Walter of Brienne, Baldwin, Count of Flanders, and his brother Henry. No previous crusade had been so methodically planned. Pope Innocent III was still young and untested, but the organization of the Fourth Crusade was his first test and proof of his authority. Gosh, we're up to 13 minutes already, so I will stop. That's only 2.5 pages. It's very dense, very detailed, and possibly a bit boring. There are lots of names and details that might not seem immediately relevant, so I shall leave that there, and we won't be continuing that one. We'll just wait for my mum to get up, and then we can go back to stuff that we know that we like. Have a really brilliant day. Bye bye.